should be annotating very, very aggressively while you are practicing and while you're performing. I often think that there is a real linear correlation between how well you annotate and then how well you perform your accuracy on the questions. If you are not annotating carefully and closely, what's going to happen is that your pacing will suffer, that you will adjudicate a particular answer, you'll think through it, maybe you'll make a decision and say, okay, it's not A or B, let me think about C or D. If you did not annotate carefully how you were thinking through A and B, by the time you get through mulling over C and D, you're going to slip back and think, wait, am I sure it's not A or B? And so even something like, look at 15. This is one very concrete tool that most people never notice, and I call these yolks. And so not like an egg yolk like you make for your omelet for breakfast, but a yolk is in the agricultural term where two things are stuck together, the way they keep horses and other animals yoked and stuck together so that the plow goes in the right direction. Just two elements linked with an and. And if you annotate one full batch of 52 questions on any form of the exam, you will see yolks everywhere. So if you look at 12B, you see fame and success. If you look at 15A, you see short-term and long-term. The College Board has some really intelligent, sharp people working for them, and the yolk is so successful at entrapping you guys because when you guys read yolks, the brain tends to consolidate the yolk into one idea, and your brain privileges the correct idea. And so they will also use terms that are adjacent related terms like fame and success. We feel like fame and success are often entwined with each other, right? People who are very successful are often well known, but there are very important distinct differences between those two things. And in this particular case, fame is an inappropriate word choice, where success is largely more or less correct. But when you read fame and success, the brain tends to flatten that into generalized success. And so you don't really notice that fame is incorrect. On 15A, this is an even more complex and problematic yolk because the yolk links two different time cues, short-term versus long-term. In the passage, let's say they refer only to short-term and the rest of the answer is correct, your brain will tend to not notice that the long-term was sort of roped in with the short-term and sort of compressed in that way. And so what's incredible, I once did this with one of my students. They sort of were struggling in one of my one-on-one classes with understanding the significance of the yolk, how it works, how it can entrap you in a particular answer. We stopped and we annotated all the yolks just for one passage, and there were 14 of them in one batch of 10 questions, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. And so it's a consistent kind of strategy that the College Board uses to keep you guys off balance and off kilter. And I always say that to do this test well, they are deeply strategic with the way they construct the exam. And so you guys really need a strategy to fight back against that. And so even with something like a yolk, that is a very strategic move to read all of your answer choices, only annotate the yolks, and then aggressively read, force, skim, and consider how one of the yolks is probably going to entrap you in one of the answers. And so once you can see the yolk, that gives you some power that you didn't have before. I always tell my students too that the way that I see the exam, it's like I need to implant my vision and my brain like a chip into your brain while I coach you, because when you first start studying, you aren't going to see everything with the way that if you have the luxury of studying these exams for years, you really do start to see patterns that are invisible and that they're almost camouflage to a lot of people.